Hey everybody, I'm Brandon. Welcome to my book reviews. I'm going to be reviewing whatever book I just finished reading, but I thought I would start by doing a quick review of the best book I've read in the last couple years, and that would be A Brief History of Seven Killings by Marlon James. I read it in the summer of 2020, so about a year and a half ago, I guess. And the copy I originally read was a paperback I picked up at Open Books in Chicago for like $10 or less. This is a hardcover that I got from the Grand Haven Public Library because my paperback is packed away somewhere because we're in the middle of a move. Long story, you don't give a shit. Let's talk about the book. So this is a big, long book. It's like close to 700 pages. And my experience with books like this, which is probably the same as yours, is that about at least half the time you pick up a book like this, you get like a third or halfway through, and it's just not got its hooks in you. You don't care that much, and you're looking at like 400 or 500 pages still to read, and so you just say the hell with it, and you never finish it. Or you read it all the way to the end, and when it's over, you feel a deep sense of sadness because you've just spent the last 5-6 weeks of your life with these characters in their world, and now it's all over and you're going to really miss them. And this is definitely the latter type of book. So there are a lot of characters in this book. There's like a directory or an index type thing of characters here in the beginning, and you're gonna want to keep that bookmarked as you read, because especially in the first half of the book, it's hard to keep track of who's who. And that makes the first half kind of tough sledding. Before you start to really get to know the characters and start to care about them, it feels like you're constantly bouncing back and forth in the narrative from one perspective to the next. And things are happening really fast. It's not always clear exactly what is happening. And much of it is written in Jamaican patois, so that can make it a little difficult. But you get used to it, like any kind of dialect. As you read, you start to pick up on what certain words mean, and there's just the rhythms of it. This book is about Jamaica, and specifically in the like mid 70s to early 90s, and it's about a lot of big things happening in Jamaica. Politics, which was tied into the Cold War and which became tied into the drug trade in the U.S. And so that's what it's about. The central incident is the attempt to assassinate Bob Marley at his home in Kingston in 1976. But what it's really about, like any good book, is all the people in the center and on the fringes of all that stuff. So, and how those things, the political machinations and Cold War affected real people in Jamaica, from the slumlords who became drug lords, to their henchmen who were just poor kids growing up in the slums who get pulled into being enforcers for the gangs that ruled the Kingston slums, and then later become drug dealers and enforcers in New York City selling crack cocaine. And then it's also got characters, some American characters, a couple of CIA guys and a sort of bumbling magazine journalist who's trying to write about what's happening with Bob Marley and is picking up on the political movements happening behind the scenes. So those are the least sympathetic characters, those Americans, but they're great because they're funny in a very sort of crass and occasionally stupid way. And that's one of the remarkable things about A Brief History of Seven Killings, is how funny it is. It is brutal and violent and graphic. None of that ever feels gratuitous, and it all is remarkably written or described with almost like with a twinkle in the writer's eye. So here's a quick excerpt. This is a chapter that's, like many others, that is narrated by a deceased Jamaican politician named Sir Arthur George Jennings. So he floats in and out of the narrative literally, and he gives us a sort of omniscient perspective that while all the other narration is in the first person from the various characters. So here he coming in after the assassination attempt, after Bob Marley has fled Kingston, but is dying of cancer. And this is about as close as we ever get to Bob Marley as a character, by the way. If you want to read this because you're really interested in Bob Marley, the person, don't bother, because there's very little about him. So anyway, without further ado, here's Sir Arthur George Jennings on page 430. Now something new is blowing through the air, an ill wind, a malaria. Still more will have to suffer, and many more will have to die. 2, 3, 100, 889. Meanwhile, I see you whirling like a dervish, under the rhythm and above it, jumping up and down the stage, always landing on your Brutus toe. Years before on the football field, a player wearing running spikes, who plays football in running spikes, stomped on your cleats and slashed the toe. When you were still a boy, you nearly sliced it in two with a hoe. A cancer is a rebellion, a cell gone rogue against the body, with turncoats turning the other way and seducing parts of you to do the same. I will divide your parts and conquer. I will shut down your limbs one by one and spill poison in your bones, because look, there is nothing in me but blackness. No matter how many times your mother wrapped it in gauze and sprinkled it with Gold Bond medicated powder, your toe is never going to heal. And now something new is blowing. 3 white men have knocked on your door, 5 years before the first warned you not to leave. Deep into 1978, the third, they always knew where to find you, warned you not to come back. The second came bearing gifts. You can't even remember him now, because he came like one of the 3 wise men, with a box wrapped like Christmas. You opened it and jumped. Somebody knew that every man in the ghetto wished he was the man that shot Liberty Valance. Brown boots, snakeskin, flirting with red. Somebody knew you loved boots almost as much as you loved brown leather pants. You pulled on the right boot and screamed like that boy who chopped his foot trying to split a coconut. You pulled off the boot, flung it aside, and watched your big toe spurt blood with every pump of your pulse. Jilly and George, they had knives handy. An incision in the stitch, flaying the skin of the boot, and there it was, a thin pointed copper wire, a straight and perfect needle that made you think of Sleeping Beauty. Something new is blowing. At the foot of Waurika Hills, the man called Copper leaves the house and closes the gate. Navy Blue Night is running and passing, passing and running. He makes 2 steps and doesn't make a third. The man called Copper drops and spits the little blood that doesn't rush out of his chest and belly. The gunman drops the M1, changes his mind, picks it up, and then runs to the car already on the move. You are in the studio with the band making a new tune. Clocks tick by in Jamaica time. Watchers take 2 hits of the collie-weed and pass on the left. 2 guitar leads wrap around each other, coiling tight like a snake fight. The new guitarist with shorter dreads, the rocker who loves Hendrix, plugs out. You shoot him a quick look with eyes wide open. Don't leave, me don't have much time. So, why would you read this book? Well, if you're interested in Jamaican politics and just Jamaica in that time period, you'll definitely learn a lot about it by reading it. This is historical fiction, I would say, but it's not the type of historical fiction that's trying to describe the facts of what happened. The epigraph is a Jamaican, or one of the epigraphs is a Jamaican proverb that says, "If it no go so, it near go so." And that's clearly his way of trying to tell you that this is not going to be a book of facts, but it is his attempt at getting at the truth of what happened and how it affected the people in Jamaica at that time. Another good reason to read it, though, whether you are interested in Jamaica or not, I was not particularly interested in it. I became interested in it by reading this book. It's just for the craft. I mean, he's just an incredible writer, and the story that he tells and the way he tells it is a joy to read. So it's an amazing book. I highly recommend taking 4 or 5 weeks of your life to read A Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James, or don't, whatever. See you next time. I'll be back in a few weeks when I finish reading the thing I'm reading now, which is Country Dark by Chris Offutt. Cheers.